I'm now going to go to my second interview with Elliott Fox, a local emerging artist, sharing his passion for greyhounds and his journey back into his art and about his upcoming exhibitions. Thanks for joining me, Elliott.
Thank you so much for having me.
Elliott, did you grow up in Canberra or did you migrate here from someplace else?
I've migrated to Canberra twice now. I was actually born in the Czech Republic in Europe.
I thought you...
Yeah. A slight accent there.
Yes, I can hear it a little bit.
I was 2 years old when my family moved to Australia, and so we came to Australia as migrants, as refugees, and it was that experience of growing up in a different country, a different language, has really started to shape my my identity, quite early on, and really gave me an early appreciation for the value of diversity and the importance of inclusion. And that's something that really developed me as a person, particularly growing up and discovering that I was a gay man as well. And
how did that? I've often wanted to ask this question, if it's okay.
Of course. Yeah.
How young were you when you recognised that you were gay?
Yeah, and look, it's an interesting question, and a question we often ask other people in the gay community. We ask each other to compare experiences, and surprisingly, it's usually quite young. So when I first realised I was different, obviously at that age, so I was about 7. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know, anything about being gay or what it actually meant to have any sort of attractions or obviously sexual feelings at that age. But from about the age of 7, you kind of realize that you are a bit different, and you're more interested in some things more than others. And then it wasn't really until I started puberty, in my early teens, that I started to realize, actually, that's kind of why I'm feeling the way that I am. I have that attraction. And I suppose for myself, being born in the 80s and growing up in the 90s, there was a lot more discussion, a lot more awareness in the media around sexual attraction, sexual orientation, and gender, and that gave me an opportunity to really learn about myself. But at the same time, it was in a context where I was constantly second guessing myself as well. So that in itself was a journey. What
about your cultural background? Is it accepted to be a gay person, or was that hard work?
I think coming from a Czech background, so Eastern Europe, it was kind of a bit fortunate in a way, because the Czechs are the most atheist country in Europe. So you don't tend to have a lot of those religious overtones, which is kind of ironic because across the border in Poland is one of the most religious countries. But the Czechs do tend to be very traditional and very family orientated. So there is a lot of consideration around, having a family and being able to to save face, for the family name and things like that. So my parents were very supportive when I came out to them in my late teens. And look, it's been very much a learning experience for them as it has been for me. But I think by the end of the day, if anyone is learning about themselves, whether it's a sexual orientation or any other aspect of their identity, they're still the same person. And, life is a journey, and, we're constantly, discovering and rediscovering ourselves, and being accepting of that and supportive is what makes the difference.
Did you reach out for support from anybody? Like any organisation, just in case someone is listening that might be having those realizations?
Look, I didn't really. I suppose I was always really quite accepting of myself without necessarily really knowing who I was or where I was going. I think what helps is certainly, just keeping an open mind and recognizing that particularly as a teenager, as a young adult, we strive to fit in, and we strive to really want to belong.
There's a lot of peer pressure, isn't there?
There is, and certainly, back when I was a teen, there was this idea of what it means to be gay, and being effeminate or limp-wristed, or those types of stereotypes, and
there was a lot of terms that were used in
there were, and you get to a point where you realize, well, I don't have to conform to any of those, and being kind of accepting that you can be who you are. And it's not until the advent of a lot of those online networking platforms, for the gay community, that you realize actually there is no one gay stereotype. There's people of all sorts of different backgrounds and identities and characters and personalities, and they just happen to be gay. And so that was really quite eye-opening for me, and I think that's probably important for a lot of other people out there, particularly young people, that you don't have to conform to other people's expectations of you. Just really try and understand yourself and what you like, what you dislike, and just be open to change.
Thank you very much for answering my question. I really appreciate it. It's something, I suppose, growing up myself, I went through periods of not being certain about certain things. But I've never asked the question.
I think the other important thing just to remember when it comes to sexual orientation, again, about those fitting those stereotypes, there's a lot of people that I know as well that didn't really question their sexuality until much later in their development, and once they were young adults, simply because they didn't necessarily feel an attraction, whether they were asexual or bisexual. It just wasn't a topic for them. And so whether you consider them to just have gone through, sexual maturity at a later age, either way, just being accepting of people as they are, and certainly trying to have those conversations with children who may be, exhibiting behaviors or traits that you think might be gay. Having that conversation early on doesn't really help anyone because they might not know themselves. So
it's like assuming that all male ballet dancers are gay.
Absolutely.
And that's not necessarily the case, actually.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So it probably leads us on to how you became involved in the art. Was that something you were studying when you were at school? Are there family members who are artists? Where did the inspiration or the yearning to become an artist come from?
I think moving to Australia and growing up in Australia and that different culture and having this kind of conflicting home culture versus school culture meant that I was always kind of in between, really understanding who I was or what I wanted to pursue in life.
The cultural challenge of being a migrant
That's right.
kid.
Yeah.
I know. Am I Australian? Am I this culture?
Yeah, and I suppose there's always this question of, is this right, is this wrong? Because we do tend to, as people, regardless of what culture you're in, try and look at the world in as much simplicity as we can. Otherwise, we're just overwhelmed with information and options and contemplation, and that's where unconscious bias really comes in. But for me and my family ended up moving around quite a bit around Australia, so we had quite an unsettled period in our lives. And so it wasn't until we moved up to Darwin and I went to high school there. I did a year 12 visual art class in year 11, and that was really just a breath of fresh air. I finally discovered that I was able to express myself in a way that I wasn't really able to behaviorally or verbally, and I've always, since then, I've always considered art to be a means of communication. I mean, they do say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it's true. And so when I did my year 12 visual art class, really enjoyed it, got high marks for it, and I wanted to become a visual artist. And I said to my father, I want to pursue this as a career. I said, oh, don't do that. There's no money in visual arts. Go be a public servant. Yeah. So after that, I went on to uni and I did a psychology degree, a part of a science degree, and then an honours in psychology, and then a law degree. And so I've studied quite a bit and ended up working in human resources for the next 15 years. And it was going well, more or less enjoyed it. You have good stories, you have bad stories, good days, bad days. But it got to that point where I just wasn't happy. I just didn't really feel like I had a sense of purpose, a sense of direction in what I was doing. So I went through a bit of a mental health breakdown as well.
Can I ask,
Yeah.
was some of that in where your values, your personal values, don't align with the values that are being demonstrated in the workplace? Was there some sort of like a moral injury underlying that?
There was to an extent, but it was more to do when there's that conflict of values between yourself and your immediate colleagues or management. And some of the best HR roles I've had are the ones where the staff actually get it, and they do want to lead by example, and they see the value in people as individuals and give people the benefit of the doubt and really support one another. The organizations where I've worked that haven't demonstrated that is where, it's a matter of putting work and profit ahead of everything else, and you lose sight of people and the individuals, and it's all about being as strictly adherent to the rules as we can be, whereas life will never fit into a perfect box, and really understanding what those challenges are is what you have to do. And so some of the roles I had, ironically, a couple of them were HR roles where the HR section actually had really terrible bullying and harassment within that team. And it was just mind-boggling that, people who are supposed to be leading by example are actually demonstrating the opposite of what we should be encouraging everyone else to be doing.
Yeah, that's... But you recognised all of those because of your psychology studies?
Partly the psychology studies, but it's also important to trust your gut feeling.
I know.
Yeah. and
I know, and sometimes people have grown up, myself included, with being told no, and you don't trust your gut feeling, and then you end up in situations where... But it's such an important thing. I think it's actually part of self-care.
It is, absolutely. And trusting your gut feeling isn't just about saying, oh, I'm going to do this because it feels right, or I'm not going to do that because, I don't want to, or I don't believe that's right. It's about recognizing when something feels off and actually then challenging yourself intellectually, or thinking about it and saying, well, why do I feel like that? What's going on here, rather than just that knee-jerk reaction? And so that's something that I've really tried to do in my art, and those values of engaging people through art in a way that stimulates them emotionally and intellectually. So, they're looking at a picture and they're thinking, this makes me feel happy or makes me feel sad. But more than that, you start to really engage in it and say, oh, this is what is really, resonating with me, or this is what's really, affecting me in this painting, and you start to get more meaning out of it.
Just going back, you left the workplace, you had a mental health challenge.
Yeah, that's right. So I kind of got to that point in life where there was a lot happening in my life, and it all just became a bit too much. And I think a lot of people, when they get to that point, it becomes overwhelming faster than they realize, or faster than they want to really admit to themselves. So often we are raised to be strong and bear the brunt of those punches from life, and
put up and shut up. Really.
Yeah, largely. And I think a lot of that is partly that cultural side of things as well. With being of an Eastern European background, mental health is not something that is really recognized. There isn't really an understanding of anxiety or depression or any other kind of mental health issues. There's still this idea that you're either mentally sound and everyone has good mental health, or you're locked away in a mental institution. So that kind of extreme, rather than recognizing that mental health is actually a spectrum. It's not black and white. That that self-care that we all need to have is dependent partly on who we are as individuals and understanding ourselves and how that changes over the course of our lives and being able to support that. But also recognizing that it's not about mental health around mental health challenges, but mental health around just general well-being and upkeep as well.
My dad used to say we've all got blood pressure.
Yeah.
We've all got mental health.
Yep.
Some of us have got high blood pressure. Some of us have got, some mental health issues that are going on. But it's a maintenance thing, as you're saying. Yeah. So you left the workplace?
Yeah, so I left the workplace as part of this mental health challenge that I had. But that was that turning point in my life that gave me not just an opportunity, but a necessity to stop and reflect on who I was, where I was going, and not to beat myself up over all of the effort and investment and everything I had done up until that point in my life, but really reflect on where I was and where I wanted to go, what really gave me that sense of meaning. And
did you have a sense that you had somehow or other failed? You'd done all these studies, but then
absolutely,
and the plan wasn't working out.
And it wasn't just the studies. I mean, I was in a really great relationship. I was in a relationship with a partner of 7 years, and someone that I loved dearly. But it certainly got to that point where I just felt like I was letting him down, and I was letting down everyone around me. That no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't good enough, and nothing that I had done up until that point was really having any sort of positive impact or result for anyone. So for me, all of that just became too much. And when I did finally stop and reflect on all that, I realized that firstly, the work I was doing was not the work I wanted to be doing. Certainly gained a lot from that, was able to contribute a lot to the workplaces and the people where I had worked. But moving forward, I needed to kind of do something that was more aligned to my values and that sense of achievement.
And happiness.
And absolutely. Look, happiness is the crux of it all, isn't it? Whether it's work or relationship or your hobbies or life or family, it all comes down to happiness. But it's one of those really ethereal kind of concepts to grasp, like, am I happy? Am I not happy? And again, going back to the idea of it not being black and white, you're not either happy or unhappy. It's actually a spectrum. There's different things that will make you happy at different points in time, at different points in your life. But when I got to that point, I also separated from my partner, basically saying, look, I can't be happy in a relationship if I'm not happy with myself.
Oh, yeah.
And that was quite a difficult decision to make. He's been incredibly supportive and understanding. I know it's been immensely difficult for him as well, but we've remained, very close friends since, which is amazing. But it also gave me an opportunity to rediscover myself a little bit more. And in a little while after that, I entered a new relationship. And that person's actually my fiance now. So,
okay.
But it was around the time that I went through my breakup that my former partner and I actually adopted our greyhound as well. So we adopted a greyhound.
Why? Why did you adopt a greyhound?
So we had talked about adopting a pet for a while. I'd always grown up with cats. I had no idea really what to expect from owning a dog or having a dog in a family. And we were looking at a few options. We were living in a townhouse. I'm thinking, well, it's not a huge space. Can't really get a high energy dog. It wouldn't be fair to them. But we had heard that there were a lot of greyhounds that were in need of homes. And we also heard that greyhounds, despite being the second fastest land animal, are actually very, very docile or subdued. And they can sleep for around 20 hours a day. And they're often referred to as perfect apartment dogs or perfect small space dogs. So we really didn't know much, but we decided, well, we'll give it a go. And the great thing about greyhounds in Australia is that there's a lot of really amazing rescue, rehoming, rehabilitation organizations. Most of them are run by volunteers, and they're all charities, so they get very little support. And they have a system set up where they are very focused on rehabilitating greyhounds when they are rescued from the racing gambling industry, and then making sure that they're matched up with the right home, the right family, the right setting, and giving them that opportunity to adjust as well. So they have like a fostering program as well. So you can foster a greyhound, see how it goes, and if they're the right fit, and if that's not working out, then you could try, seeing if there's a better match for a different greyhound for you and for them. So we thought, we'll give it a go. And Adam Barker, we met him 2 weeks after he came out of the racing industry. And
what happens to the dogs that don't get rescued? Is this not a good question?
No. Look, I think it's an important question, and
sorry to ask, but
no, I appreciate it. Yeah,
because this is Your heart has been triggered by knowing.
Yeah, very, very much so, and it's definitely a trigger for my heart, and it has been a big part and a big inspiration for the exhibitions that I'm about to launch. But just to give you a bit of background to greyhounds in Australia, so there is a greyhound racing industry, or a dog racing industry, which is quite prominent in Australia. There's only 5 countries in the world that have greyhound racing, one of those being New Zealand, that has announced that they're banning it next year. As you may have heard, there have been a lot of pretty prominent controversies across most of the states and territories, really horrible, horrible things that come out of that. And nevertheless, I mean, all the state and territory governments keep referring to giving the industry a last chance to clean up their act. And there have been many last chances. But despite that, in Australia, a greyhound dies on a racetrack every 3 days. And 30 are injured every day. And so they kind of get into this system where they're basically churned out. They're disposable, or they're a commodity. And we lose sight of them, that they're a dog, that they are, you know, a family member, just like a Labrador or a Cavoodle or any other family dog. And we don't realize that we get caught up in this complicity and ignorance and apathy towards greyhounds just because of how they're used in the racing industry. And so when you start looking at some of the statistics, you realize that there are, you know, tens of thousands that are bred. The ones that aren't good enough disappear. And the ones that, you know, aren't lucky enough to come out of the racing industry are euthanized, and it's very common. And so it really is quite heart-wrenching, and it's even more heart-wrenching when you hear more about what happens to those other greyhounds that do disappear. And I don't want to go into too much detail on the radio, you know, for your listeners, but certainly Adam was one of the lucky ones. And often people who are pro greyhound racing or dog racing do say, oh, then they're not rescued, they're retired. And it's like, well, it's an interesting definition of retiring when, you know, they're basically the ones that are actually lucky to survive. When you see some of the really horrific videos of greyhounds falling over and injuring themselves, because they run at 70 kilometers an hour. And so if you imagine any other person being flung through the air at 70 kilometers an hour and then colliding with something, the injuries would be horrific, let alone for a greyhound. So, yeah.
It's a sense of that greyhounds are powerless to control their lives and their destinies, isn't there?
They're made powerless by the politicians and the lawmakers. In Australia and in a lot of jurisdictions, they're considered to be livestock.
Right.
Which basically means,
I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, so they basically get fewer protections and safeguards compared to other dogs. A lot of them in the racing industry tend to be kept in very small cages for 23 hours a day. It's really quite horrific. There's a number of inquiries and reforms happening across a lot of states and territories. Last week I was reading that in South Australia, half the reforms are well underway. However, some things will take time. And one of the things that was described as taking time was ensuring that all greyhounds in the racing industry have access to fresh water. That might take up to 12 months.
What?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think that's just mind-blowing. I've got my flask of water over here. I have to have a sip every so often. Yeah. God help us. That's terrible.
It is terrible.
You need water to live.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing that's really heartbreaking, that there are these other arguments that come up that supposedly greyhounds are treated better than royalty, or trainers love their dogs. And it's like, well, look, if you truly love your dog, you wouldn't be putting them out onto a racetrack that has a 1 in 3, or rather that has a death rate of one dog every 3 days. Because you love them, and knowing that you're putting them in that really dangerous situation for your own gambling gains. I mean, you wouldn't do that to a family member, so why are you doing this to a greyhound?
So they're a commodity.
They are, yeah.
And so you were inspired to, and what's the name of your dog?
Adam Barker.
Adam. Why?
Well, he came with the name Adam. So I think one of the things that a lot of greyhound rescue organizations do is that they tend to give the dogs coming into their care a human name to kind of really personify them a bit more.
Yes.
And Adam obviously was no exception.
Adam is the first man.
The first name, yeah.
The first man, Adam.
Oh, he
Adam,
is actually, yeah.
Yes, the first man. So he's your first dog.
He is, yeah. We did have a joke that if we're going to get another greyhound, a female greyhound, we'll name her Eve. Yeah. Or if we've got a male greyhound, it would be Steve. So
that's funny.
So we adopted Adam, and look, it took him a bit of time to kind of really feel comfortable, and it took us a bit of time to really understand him. But greyhounds are just such incredibly affectionate, gentle, quiet dogs. Adam barely barks, despite the name. That's why we gave him the surname Barker as a bit of a joke. But it really took about 6 months for him to come out of his shell. Like when we first adopted him, he used to lean against people, and I know a lot of greyhounds tend to do that, as a general trait. But for him, he replaced with leaning against people with wagging his tail. And that really melted our hearts. We were realizing that he was starting to actually feel joy, and he was comfortable, and he was feeling safe and secure where he was. And he certainly came to us, with quite a few scars on his body, and a lot of greyhounds, when they come out of the racing industry, they have a lot of teeth removed because they've had very little, if no, dental care. I'm actually wearing a pendant with one of Adam's canines that was taken out.
Oh my gosh! So are they poorly fed as well? They seem to be so thin.
Yeah, I mean, look, they do have a skinny stature naturally, but a lot of them do tend to be underfed. They're obviously given a very different regiment of diet and food based on how they're used for racing. But with Adam, we also discovered that he's incredibly intelligent. So we made a point of every meal time with him as an enrichment opportunity. So we were, gradually kind of training him and using my background in psychology, in terms of positive and negative reinforcement.
He's Pavlov's dog.
I hope he's treated much better than Pavlov's dogs were, but yes. But we realized that he's actually very intelligent, and he gets so excited, when you communicate with him, and he understands what you're asking. And so we've realized that he actually knows over 20 commands. So he's, and I've got a video up on my YouTube as well of him showing off some of those commands. But a lot of, Adam is very much about recognizing him as a family member. He is someone who, yes, he's a family dog. You have to take care of him. And, we take him for 2, 10-minute walks a day. He sleeps 20 hours. But he is a family member, and he has, likes and dislikes. And he's certainly not perfect. No, I mean, no dog is, or no person is either. But it's really about understanding each other. Yeah.
Welcome back. That was part 1 of my conversation with Elliott Fox. I'm now going to go to some music, and then we'll be back with part 2. From Moby, We Are All Stars. You're listening to Transforming Perceptions on 2XX Community Radio, and we're people-powered radio here. But we are going back to part 2 of our interview with Elliott Fox now. And somehow your art, did you start painting him?
It was around the time that we adopted Adam that I started kind of reevaluating my life purpose. And we had already adopted Adam.
It's interesting, actually, how the dog has had his journey and you've had your journey.
I think it kind of happened a little bit by coincidence initially, but then it all seemed to happen concurrently. So when I did go through my mental health challenge and I moved out, and Adam actually started exhibiting behaviors that he was missing me as well. So like where I used to sleep in a spare bedroom, he would go and just lie there, which is something he would never used to do. There'll be no other reason for him to do that. And so it was around that time that Adam and I got to kind of really appreciate each other's company and get to know each other in a different way. And that also coincided around me learning a lot more about the racing industry and just the really barbaric and abhorrent conditions. And it was just,
I know it's so hard to find words sometimes.
It is, and sometimes you do wonder, how do I define this? I mean, it's not really even a means of defining it as a human, sport. It's really a barbaric activity that should have been, gotten rid of. And but anyway, so with Adam, around the time that we adopted him, I started, questioning, where I was going, what I was doing, and I decided that I needed to go back into the arts and rediscover that joy and that real passion that I had all those years ago when I was in high school. And so I enrolled in a diploma in visual arts at the Canberra Institute of Technology, which has been amazing and has really helped me develop some of my skills and really develop my style.
Particular media that you like to work with?
Yeah, so my main media that I work with is impasto painting, so it's textured paintings. I also work quite a bit with sculpture and screen printing as well. So,
is that your shirt something you did?
This one? No. This is I wish. No, this is a Japanese master of woodblock block printing. So I do take quite a bit of inspiration from the Yuko-e prints from Japan. So Japanese art is something that has inspired me a lot, and the Japanese aesthetic. So when I went back to doing my visual arts, it's taken a couple of years to really define my style and kind of what I want to do with it. But what's always been really important to me is to create art that is meaningful, art that actually engages people emotionally and intellectually and has some sort of purpose. And for me, developing my art, Adam became my artistic muse, partly in his character and personality, but partly recognizing, the journey that he's been on and what he can't tell us about that journey, and recognizing that there's so many of Adam's kin and brothers and sisters that haven't been as lucky as him. And so when I was getting to that point in my art, I decided that I needed to develop a solo exhibition to showcase what I do. And the theme was very obvious. It was going to be greyhounds. So I started planning this 2 years ago to really do this right, both as my debut solo exhibition, but also to really give that voice to greyhounds and shine a spotlight on the dog racing industry. So I've now developed an exhibition. It's a pretty major exhibition.
How many pieces? So
I have 18 pieces across the three mediums. And the exhibition opens in Sydney next week. Yikes.
No, it'll be good.
I hope so.
It'll be good.
And then it's opening in Canberra at Q Gallery in Ainslie on the 12th of September. It'll be there for 2 weeks. And then travelling down to Melbourne in October and across to Perth in January. So it's a big undertaking. The reason for this as well is when I started planning this exhibition, Canberra, or the ACT, is the only state or territory in Australia where greyhound racing is banned. So I didn't want to do an exhibition here and not really get across to the audience that I'm trying to reach. And so...
so your art, you want to influence change?
Oh, absolutely.
Create change.
Yeah, I'm hoping to give people an opportunity to see greyhounds and to really connect with them and see that they aren't just a dog or an object or a car, that they are individuals and they are worthy of that respect and they are worthy of that care and protection and love that any other dog or person or any family member is deserving of. So my exhibition has two parts to it. The first part looks at greyhounds in terms of the character and their personality through a series of portraits. I have to say, I love those portraits. And I hope when people look at them, they will see that each dog and each greyhound in each of those portraits, it has its own character and has its own personality, and it just glows. And those are greyhounds that have been so fortunate to be adopted into their forever homes and have had that opportunity to really blossom and build their confidence and And the stories that their family have shared with me after seeing those portraits, really resonate. There's one portrait of a greyhound named George, and it's a gorgeous, close-up portrait of George just smiling, lying on a couch. And it's one of those really happy kind of portraits, but at the same time, it's also tinged with sadness because you realize that George is actually missing a lot of his front teeth. And that's because a lot of greyhounds, out of boredom, end up chewing their cages, and they just gnaw away their teeth because they're just so bored out of their minds in the racing industry. And that's something that George obviously carries with him, even after being rescued. So that's what I mean about art that is engaging emotionally but also intellectually. It really makes you think a lot more about these individuals and their background and their stories and how many others there are as well. The second half of the exhibition looks at dog racing, and I tried to do that in a way that is delivered through subtle messaging and a lot of symbolism. So there's artworks there that really try and get people to look at dog racing in a way that they perhaps haven't looked at it before. It's not about entertainment. It's not about this exciting race, or it's not about a quick, win through gambling, but rather the commoditization of greyhounds, where we lose sight of them as individuals, as these sentient beings that do feel, that are scared, that are happy, that are sad, that are bored, and really start to kind of put that into that context. And so I really didn't want to create any art that was going to be confronting from a shock value. Like, I didn't want to create any art that was going to be gore or anything like that. I mean, I could easily put up images or videos of what actually happens in the racing industry or what happens on the racetracks, but instead I wanted to engage people to actually think about how it relates to them. And I hope the artworks in the exhibition do that.
It's extraordinary that you're doing this, I think, and in a way that does get people to actually critically reflect. Without the shock value. I mean, I think people are so bombarded with stuff on television and media at the moment, and you kind of become, what's the word?
Desensitized almost.
Desensitized.
The problem with shock kind of value is that people shut off. Like, they don't, if they see something that's too confronting or just makes them feel ill, they will shut off and not engage with it. And I obviously don't want that. I want people to engage with it. The centerpiece artwork is called Saint Grey, which is also the name of the exhibition, Saint Grey, and it's a magnificent life-size sculpture of this greyhound with these huge angel wings. And it's a sculpture that represents reverence and hope. It's about providing greyhounds and old dogs with a saint of their own to guide them in life and death. So it's about really recognizing that, greyhounds and dogs and, all non-human animals are worthy of, feeling protected and guided through their existence. So I will just say that the exhibition is very proud to have a new principal sponsor. So Grey 2K USA Worldwide, which is an advocacy group for greyhounds that works around the world. Grey 2K USA have played a major role in the outlawing of greyhound racing across most states in the United States, with the exception of one, West Virginia, which is still pending. But it's a huge achievement. So I'm really thrilled to have them on board. But I have also been, really honoured to have the support of a lot of other businesses and organisations. And in Canberra, I do want to give a shout out to Instant Colour Press and Belconnen, Q Gallery and Q Hair in Ainslie, Hillary's Art, which is Imagery Inc. And I do also, I want to give a big shout out to Pizza Gusto in Braddon, who are very generously catering the event in Canberra as well.
Oh, fantastic. Yep. So, but you've also got one piece in the Animalia exhibition.
That's right.
Coming up this Friday.
That's right. Yeah. So Animalia is an exhibition that's opening up at Q Gallery in Ainslie. It's going to be a really spectacular exhibition. They have had over 50 entries, from what I hear. I do have an artwork as part of that, as a bit of a prelude to my own exhibition at Q Gallery. But yeah, Animalia should be a great exhibition. It opens this Friday. And I think it's running for a week or two. Yeah,
a couple of weeks. And I think it's great that Q Gallery is actually supporting local emerging artists.
No, that's a very important point as well. I think trying to work as an artist in Canberra has brought its own set of challenges, and I think Canberra can sometimes be a bit insular, and I know politicians make a point of saying that it's a Canberra bubble. I wholeheartedly disagree with that, but I think in Canberra there is this sense of an inner kind of art crowd as well, and I have been rejected from some art residences, being told I'm not a real artist.
That's horrible.
Yeah, it's a bit surprising, but you do kind of reflect on that and thinking, well, I'm not really creating art to win your favor or win your approval. I'm creating art because I believe in what I'm doing, and I'm trying to give a voice to greyhounds and really advocate for them. Advocate for the ones that don't have a voice.
Well, I think it's a voice for you as well, having gone on that experience where you've changed your career. And been through that soul searching. It's your voice as well.
It is.
And for people to sort of, I think that actually in Canberra there is a lot of that, not being really curious or interested in other people.
Look, partly that. I think there's still very much a cookie cutter approach. And because we are largely a public service city, I think a lot of people do innately have this idea of people fitting into a box or ticking boxes in order to be considered one thing or another. Having tried to go through a grant process with Arts ACT, which was unsuccessful twice, really highlighted that for me, that there's less emphasis on the value of a project and how much attention and support and interest it's actually demonstrated to be getting, and more about ticking boxes and putting projects and initiatives and people into either a yes or no category, rather than saying, well, how can we actually support you? How can we give you the benefit of the doubt?
Yeah. And, we've seen what's happened to the School of Art at the ANU.
Yeah. And the School of Art is actually a very interesting case in point as well, where ANU is an institution that has historically been incredible. I mean, they've had those global standings. They've been a leader in a lot of areas. And I've studied at ANU. I have 2 degrees from ANU. And it's been very interesting to see how ANU has kind of withered away in a lot of ways. And I've worked there as well, and unfortunately not a place I would recommend to work. But it's been quite interesting to see how kind of all of that has shifted. And unfortunately, what I've been seeing a lot from the ANU School of Art is that there's this emphasis on experimentation and really trying to be quite esoteric in your approach, whereas for me it misses the point of what art can and should be. Art needs to be about engaging people, about communicating, and really what's the point of creating art that half your audience is just going to look at and question, is this actually art, or is this an air conditioner on the wall? Or is this someone's trash? And I'm sure you've heard about the cases where people leave shoes in the corner of an actual gallery and people think it's an art piece, and things like that.
It's just that somebody left their shoes there.
Yeah, and that's what I'm really hoping with my art, that I am almost going back to some of those older values that were coming out from the 60s and 70s, where people were saying, well, art, actually does need to have a purpose. It does need to engage people. And so I do take a lot of inspiration from artists like Banksy or Keith Haring, that were using their art in a way that was simple and elegant, that had a message and was trying to engage people and was doing it in really thought-provoking ways and creative ways. And that's what I'm really trying to do with my art. So really trying to engage people in a way that they feel like it is actually speaking to them, that it's not trying to speak at them or in spite of them. It is actually trying to speak with them.
To give them questioning.
Yeah. So that kind of contemplative, meaningful, thought-provoking art. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have no intention of going to the ANU Art School, but I will say that I'm very thrilled to have had the opportunity to have studied at CIT, completing my diploma of visual art. That has been a great experience. Highly recommend it to anyone that is interested in the visual arts, even just to develop your own skills and discover your own your interests and your style. But for me, I'm not interested in engaging in organizations that really see themselves as being exclusive or defining what art is. For me, we're all on this journey together, and we need to be professional and getting to a point where you're not replying to emails, particularly from emerging artists that are still trying to define themselves or get some recognition and build their credibility. So ignoring them or cutting them off or really discouraging them actively is...
Oh, yeah, you'd like stuff that I've been doing with my music, and I've had to defer my studies this year. Well, I deferred first semester, and then the whispers that I'd heard about what was on the cards over at the ANU in the School of Music has come to fruition. And I don't know whether I want to do second semester there with all this upheaval.
Yeah.
And it is, as an artist or a musician, you put yourself is in those creations.
Yep.
And to get knocked back or told you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Rather than... This part's really great.
Yeah.
You could perhaps try this or
well, that's the interesting
sit with somebody and walk with them on their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've really tried to go out of my way and support other artists in my own journey as well. So the exhibition that I'm opening in Sydney, the space is a little bit bigger than what I needed. So I've ended up hosting a group exhibition for other artists.
Oh, cool.
So I put out a call to other artists to actually exhibit alongside my solo exhibition and showcase their work. And so those types of opportunities, I think, is about supporting each other, not putting each other down. Yeah, exactly. That's what's missing, that community. And recognizing that it isn't just about, getting ahead or putting one another down. And it's interesting because some people do feel like that they are owed a certain type of or certain level of respect or recognition, and as soon as you, I suppose, question that, or as soon as there's word on the grapevine that you're not towing that line, get pushed into that kind of outer circle or that outcast side. And I think that that's an experience that a lot of people have, and to varying degrees. So the message that I have for a lot of other artists or anyone really starting out in a career of their choice is, be true to yourself and lead by example. And if you want to be supported, be sure to support others as well on that journey, and recognize that people are prone to making mistakes or being misunderstood or misjudged. So giving people that benefit of the doubt is actually really important.
Well, just again, your exhibition in next week in Sydney.
That's right. So the exhibition St. Grey opens in Sydney on Friday.
Whereabouts?
At a gallery called M2 in Surrey Hills. The Friday is a ticketed event, but then it's open every day for 2 weeks until the 25th. And then the exhibition comes to Canberra on the 12th of September at Q Gallery in Ainsley. Is the opening night.
Is that a ticketed thing?
No, that's open to everyone. It's a small venue, but luckily there's a lot of space out the front as well. So
hopefully the weather will be warmer.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yes.
I hope it holds up. Yeah. So it'll be in Canberra until the 25th of September for those 2 weeks.
And then it goes to
Melbourne in October at a gallery called Off the Curb in Collingwood.
Right.
And then across to Perth at the Gallows Gallery in Mossman Park.
Right. Thank you so much for coming and talking to me today.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate it.
And not just sharing about the greyhounds and your art, but also your personal story. And about your passion for actually recognising that we're all worth something.
Look, absolutely. And I think it goes back to that leading by example, and recognising that we're all worth something is as much about ourselves and the person sitting across from us as much as it is about all other living beings, and recognising that greyhounds are worthy as well. And the way we treat them is a reflection of how we want to be treated ourselves.
I think that's a fine note to end on.
Thank you.
Thank you.